The news spread across the ranch before the sun had even climbed above the far hills. A foal had been born during the night, but something was wrong. The ranch hands whispered about it with troubled faces, saying the newborn horse had backward legs and wouldn't survive long. Some said it wouldn't stand. Others said it wouldn't even last the day. The air felt heavy, thick with the kind of silence that follows disappointment. People tried not to look too hopeful, as if caring too much would make the loss harder. But despite all the grim talk, a quiet spark of curiosity moved through the place. That morning, a 13-year-old girl stepped out of the small house near the barn, still pulling her boots on, unaware of the storm of doubt gathering inside the stables. She lived for moments like these, when the world felt fresh and the sound of animals waking up surrounded her. She had grown up around horses her whole life, watching them run, learning their moods, understanding how they breathed. She always said animals spoke without words, and she liked listening more than most people did. Her days were built on small acts of care feeding, brushing, guiding, and learning. She knew that every horse had its own story. As she walked toward the barn, she noticed how the adults stood around in little groups. They kept glancing inside as if something painful waited for them. Even from a distance she sensed that the mood was unusual. She had seen hardship before, but this felt different. She heard someone mutter about how nature had already made its choice and there was nothing more to be done. Another insisted it was kinder not to drag out the suffering. A few nodded in agreement, speaking with flat certainty, the kind that usually ended conversations. The girl stopped just outside the barn door. Her heart thudded against her ribs. For some reason she felt drawn to whatever was inside. She didn't know what had happened yet, but she felt the same pull she had felt every time a frightened animal had needed someone who was willing to stand close instead of stepping back. She reached for the wooden door and slipped through the narrow opening without saying a word. The barn smelled of hay, old wood, and the sharp tang of worry. A few ranch hands stood near one of the stalls, shaking their heads. She walked toward them slowly, her boots brushing the straw-covered ground. As she approached, the group parted slightly, enough for her to see the Mari inside pacing with restless steps. The horse looked shaken and confused, as if she knew something wasn't right with her newborn. Then the girl saw the foal. It lay on the ground, small and fragile, curled in a way that looked wrong. Its legs bent in directions that made the ranch hands wince whenever they looked too long. The foal's chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths, and its soft coat glistened with the last traces of birth. Its eyes were open, dark and alert, watching the world with a kind of quiet hope that didn't match the bleak predictions surrounding it. One of the men looked at the girl with a heavy sigh. He tried to gently turn her away, telling her the foal wasn't going to make it and she shouldn't get too close. But she didn't move. Instead, she stepped nearer until she stood just a few feet from the tiny horse. She crouched down, folding her hands together, studying the foal with a gaze that seemed to carry more patience than most adults could gather in times like these. She noticed the legs first, twisted backward in a way that made standing impossible. She could hear the Marais' breathing grow faster behind her, worried and unsure. The girl understood immediately why people said the foal had no chance. But she also saw something they didn't. The foal kept trying to move, gently shifting, struggling to push itself upright even though its body wouldn't let it. There was a spark inside it, a stubborn will that made the girl breathe a little deeper. She looked up at the ranch hands and asked if anyone had tried helping it stand. They shook their heads, explaining that nothing could fix legs that had formed wrong. They said it was simply the way nature worked, but the girl didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the foal, letting herself feel the weight of the moment. To her, it didn't matter if the odds were stacked high. What mattered was that the foal was alive and fighting. She could see determination in its tiny movements. Its ears twitched whenever she shifted, and its eyes followed her like it wanted her to understand that it wasn't giving up. Something stirred inside her chest, a mixture of protectiveness and belief. She knew this wasn't a normal birth. She knew this was a challenge far bigger than anything she had faced. But she also knew that giving up before trying wasn't something she could do. The ranch owner stepped closer, his voice low and tired. He told her the foal wasn't meant to survive. He explained that sometimes things like this happened and no one could change it. She listened respectfully, but her expression didn't match his certainty. She asked if she could stay with the foal for a while just to make sure it wasn't scared or alone. The owner hesitated, then nodded, thinking it wouldn't change anything anyway. Once the adults stepped back, the girl eased herself to the ground beside the stall, careful not to startle the mare or the foal. She rested her hands lightly on the straw and let the gentle sounds of the barn settle around her. Slowly, she reached toward the foal without touching it, letting it get used to her presence. The foal blinked at her, a soft, unsure movement, but not one of fear. She whispered to it in a voice barely louder than the sound of hay shifting under hooves. She told it she was there. She told it wasn't alone. Minutes passed like that, quiet and full of unspoken understanding. The girl felt the weight of every breath the foal took. She felt the mare watching her with protective eyes, yet trusting her enough not to interfere. The ranch hands gradually drifted away, shaking their heads but letting her stay. They didn't understand why she cared so much, they didn't see any hope. But she believed in something they didn't. She believed the foal wasn't done fighting. The longer she stayed there, the more she felt a strange warmth grow inside her. It wasn't confidence or certainty. It was something deeper, like a promise forming silently between her and the newborn horse. A promise that she wouldn't walk away no matter what anyone said. She didn't know how to fix twisted legs or how to turn impossible odds into something real, but she knew she could try. She knew she could be the one who didn't give up. As the foal moved again, trying to lift its head, she leaned closer and spoke to it softly. She could feel the tension of the moment rising, the sense that something important was about to unfold. The mare nickered low, stepping closer to her baby. The girl placed a hand on the stall rail, steadying herself, her heart beating faster. Then the foal stretched one leg, trembling hard, and for a second it looked like it might attempt something no one believed it could do. The girl held her breath as the foal pushed its tiny muscles again, refusing to stay still, refusing to surrender. Just before it tried again, a shadow moved across the barn entrance. The girl looked up and saw someone stepping inside, someone who had heard the rumors and wasn't pleased about the idea of a child interfering with what they called a hopeless case. The girl's heart tightened. She knew this moment was about to change everything. The girl froze when she saw the figure step into the barn. The light behind the person made their outline sharp against the shadows. It was the ranch vet, a man who had seen more horse births and losses than most people could count. He walked with a kind of steady confidence that came from years of experience, but his face showed a worry he didn't bother to hide. He took one long look toward the stall, then another toward the girl kneeling beside the foal. His boots stopped just a few steps behind her. He asked what she was doing there in a tone that wasn't angry, but firm enough to make the ranch hands nearby straighten their backs. The girl looked up slowly and told him she just wanted to stay with the foal. She tried to keep her voice calm, though the tension in her chest made it hard to breathe. The vet sighed and knelt down beside her. He didn't speak right away. He wanted to see the newborn for himself. He leaned in and inspected the foal carefully, moving gently so he wouldn't frighten the mare. He studied the legs, the hooves, the joints that bent the wrong way. He touched nothing, only observing. The girl watched him, trying to read his expression, hoping for any sign that he might see something good in the tiny horse. After a long moment, the vet sat back with a slow breath. He explained that the foal had been born with a severe deformity, one that normally kept animals from ever standing or walking. He spoke calmly, but the girl felt each word settle over her like cold rain. Still, she didn't step away. Instead, she asked him if anything could be done. Her voice trembled a little, but she held steady. The ranch vet shook his head. He had seen this before, he said, and the outcomes had never changed. Nature had its own ways. The girl listened, but something inside her held firm. She believed it wasn't the end. She didn't know why, only that the foal didn't seem ready to give up. The vet noticed her silence and softened his tone. He told her he understood that she cared. Sometimes that was the hardest part about working with animals. Caring often meant hurting later, but the girl didn't look away from the foal. She reached into the stall slowly and let the newborn sniff her fingers. The small horse lifted its head, weak but curious. It was the tiniest gesture, but it filled her with a feeling she couldn't explain. The mare stepped closer, brushing her nose against her baby as if reassuring it. The sound of her breath filled the air. The girl watched the mare and felt a tightening in her chest. She knew the mare was scared. She also knew that showing fear in front of her baby wasn't natural for a horse. Something about the situation was pushing every instinct to its edge. The vet rose to his feet, saying he would return later to check on things again. The girl remained where she was until his footsteps faded down the barn aisle. When she finally stood, she placed a hand on the stall door, leaning on it while she tried to gather herself. She kept thinking about how everyone else saw the foal as hopeless. She wondered if they only said that because it was easier than trying. She wondered how many animals over the years had been labeled impossible simply because no one had looked long enough to notice the small sparks of strength they still held. She walked back toward the foal and lowered herself to the straw once more. She began talking softly, telling the tiny horse about all the strong animals she had met, about the ones who had been scared at first but grew braver every day. The foal listened with calm eyes, even though it didn't understand the words. It understood her tone, and that was enough. She stayed with it until the ranch owner called her name from outside, his voice carrying through the open door. She stood reluctantly and walked back out into the daylight. The ranch owner looked tired, as if the weight of the morning had been too much already. He asked her if she was all right. She nodded, even though her heart felt heavy. He rested his hands on his hips and told her that sometimes the best intentions couldn't change certain things. He reminded her that caring for animals meant learning when to step back. She listened quietly but didn't agree. She knew he meant well, but he didn't see what she had seen. He didn't feel what she felt when the foal tried to lift its head for the second time. Later that day she returned to the barn every chance she got. During chores she kept glancing inside. During lunch she barely ate, wanting to check on the newborn again. The ranch hands noticed and exchanged looks, some sympathetic, some skeptical. They didn't want her getting attached to something so fragile. But she wasn't thinking about attachment. She was thinking about survival, about resilience, about the strange, stubborn spark she saw in the foal's eyes. Whenever she slipped back into the stall area, the mare would lift her head, watching her with a guarded expression that slowly softened the more she visited. The girl talked to both of them. She whispered reassurance, telling them they weren't alone. The foal tried to move a few more times, struggling to shift its weight even though its legs betrayed it. Every attempt made the girl's breath catch in her throat. She knew the foal couldn't stand, but she admired its effort. That effort told her more than anything anyone else had said. As the afternoon deepened into evening, clouds began moving across the sky. A cool wind stirred the dust around the ranch. The girl stayed in the barn longer than she was supposed to, gently brushing the mare's neck while keeping an eye on the newborn. She imagined what the foal might be like if it could grow strong. She pictured it running, playing, exploring open fields. She wondered if there was a way to help it get there. She didn't know much about treatments or braces or special care, but she had seen animals recover from injuries no one thought they would recover from. If a wound could heal, maybe legs could be strengthened too. She didn't know. She only knew she wanted to try. When the ranch owner appeared again, he paused at the sight of her sitting quietly beside the stall. He watched her for a moment, then spoke more gently than before. He told her she had a kind heart. Sometimes kindness made things harder before they made things better. He didn't stop her from staying, though. His voice held a mix of caution and respect, as if he knew she had already made up her mind. The girl waited until the barn grew dim before she finally stood to leave. She promised the foal she would return at first light. She whispered that she believed in it, even if no one else did. She didn't care how long it took. She didn't care how hard it was. She would find a way to help. As she stepped outside, she noticed someone standing near the fence, watching the barn with a concerned look. It was one of the older ranch hands, someone who had worked there longer than any of the others. He approached her and asked if she was truly planning to stay involved. She nodded without hesitation. The older worker studied her face, then the barn door behind her. He told her something strange. He said that sometimes an animal was born different for a reason. Sometimes those animals carried a story that wasn't finished yet. Sometimes they were meant to change things. The girl didn't know what he meant. She wanted to ask more, but he walked away before she could. His words lingered in her mind, stirring questions she wasn't ready to voice. That night she lay awake, thinking about the foal. She tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. She hoped for the smallest sign of strength. She hoped for a hint that her belief wasn't misplaced. But deep down she also sensed something else, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear. It was more like a warning that the road ahead would not be easy. There were people who would disagree with her, people who would tell her she was wasting time. There would be setbacks, doubt, and moments when she would be forced to defend her choice again and again. When dawn finally broke, she hurried to the barn before anyone else woke. She pushed the door open with her heart racing. Something inside was different. Something she didn't expect. Something that would change everything she thought she understood about the tiny horse she had decided to believe in. The next morning, the barn was bathed in soft gold light that fell between the rafters, catching dust in its glow. The girl hurried down the lane from the house, her boots crunching over gravel and straw, heart pounding with anticipation. She didn't know if the foal had slept well, if it had eaten enough, or if its small, twisted legs had suffered during the night. All she knew was that she had to see for herself. She pushed open the barn door and froze for a moment, taking in the quiet hum of the morning. The mare lifted her head at the sound of her footsteps, ears twitching toward her. The foal lay in the straw, still, almost statuesque, but its eyes followed her as if recognizing a friend. She knelt beside it, carefully brushing a strand of straw away from its face. Her hands were steady, though her chest ached with worry. She whispered softly, speaking words she didn't expect the foal to understand, but it seemed to react anyway. Its ears flicked, its small nostrils flared. The tiniest shift of its legs showed life, and that was enough to give her hope. She could feel the tension of yesterday clinging to the air, thick with doubts the ranch hands had whispered. She wasn't alone for long. The ranch vet arrived soon after, his boots thudding quietly across the barn floor. He studied the foal from a distance before approaching. "It's trying," he said finally, almost under his breath. "But the deformity, it's severe." He knelt, eyes scanning the foal's legs. "Even with care, there's a long chance it won't survive. Or if it does, it may never walk." His words landed heavy, as if each one weighed down the straw around them. The girl nodded, though her mind was already racing with possibilities he didn't consider. She asked him questions he hesitated to answer. Could braces help? Could exercises strengthen the muscles? Could feeding it a special diet make a difference? He shook his head slowly. Some things might help, he said, but nature had limits. Still, he didn't stop her from trying. He only warned her not to push the foal too hard, or it might give up entirely. She promised she wouldn't, though inside she vowed to find a way. Every fiber of her being was tied to this tiny horse. The mare shifted in the stall, nudging the foal closer to her side. The girl noticed the animal's protective stance. The mare seemed to sense the girl's intentions and allowed her presence, even as she kept a watchful eye. There was an unspoken alliance forming in the barn, one built on trust and quiet observation. The girl realized that her own determination wasn't enough. She would need the mare's cooperation to guide the foal through the early struggles. Outside the barn, whispers started circulating. Some of the ranch hands doubted the girl's efforts. They murmured about how the foal would never survive, and that she was wasting her time. Others watched with curiosity, noting her unwavering focus and gentle touch. One older worker, someone who had raised horses his entire life, lingered near the barn door, studying her. "She's stubborn," he muttered to a younger hand. "But there's something about the way she sees things. Maybe she's right." He didn't say more, but his gaze lingered longer than most. The girl spent hours at the foal's side that day. She tried small exercises suggested in books she had read, helping the newborn shift weight and push gently against the straw. She observed every reaction, every twitch of muscle, every flinch or hopeful glance. Each movement, no matter how tiny, she recorded in her mind like a map. Every small success was celebrated quietly, every failure noted without judgment. The foal responded to her presence, not out of obedience but out of trust. It was subtle, but it was there, and the girl clung to that spark. Late that afternoon, a storm rolled in over the ranch, bringing with it a chill wind and low clouds. The barn doors rattled with the gusts, and the smell of rain drifted through the open windows. The Murray grew anxious, pacing the stall in nervous rhythm. The foal huddled closer to her side, its small body trembling not entirely from the cold. The girl's hands hovered over the newborn, ready to steady it. She whispered softly, promising warmth and care. She knew that storms tested more than the weather. They tested resolve, patience, and belief. And she would not let the foal face it alone. As the first drops fell, the ranch owner walked into the barn, shaking his head. "You really think this is going to work?" he asked, voice low but not unkind. The girl looked up, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have to try." "It can't just be left alone," the owner exhaled slowly, seeing the determination on her face. He nodded, silently offering his quiet support. No one else spoke. The storm outside roared louder, but inside, a fragile hope held the barn together. Over the next few days, the girl's routine grew more structured. Early mornings were spent feeding and gently massaging the foal's legs. Afternoons focused on stretching exercises and letting it attempt small movements, and evenings observing how it rested beside its mother. She discovered subtle signs that showed progress. A slight improvement in muscle tone, a tiny shift in its leg positions, a flicker of coordination. Each small advancement felt monumental, though she knew the path ahead would be long and uncertain. Meanwhile, tensions at the ranch simmered. Some workers openly doubted her. Others whispered encouragement behind closed doors. The older worker continued to observe quietly, offering occasional advice without undermining her. The ranch vet checked in regularly, offering guidance with caution. Each perspective added layers of complexity. The girl had to navigate skepticism, uncertainty, and her own fears while maintaining trust with the foal and its mother. One morning, she noticed a fresh complication. The foal's legs, still backward, seemed to strain more than usual. She called the vet immediately. He examined it carefully, shaking his head. "There's a risk of injury if it pushes too hard," he warned. "You need to be careful." One wrong move could set it back. The girl's stomach tightened. She had to balance belief with caution. Every decision now carried weight. One mistake could undo everything. Even with these challenges, she persevered. She experimented with straw padding, gentle lifts, and exercises designed to strengthen the muscles. The mare seemed to understand her intentions, nudging and guiding the foal when it struggled. The bond between the girl and the animals deepened with each passing day, forming a quiet alliance that no one could fully explain. The barn became a small universe of hope and resilience, suspended between doubt and determination. As the foal began to attempt standing, trembling against its own weight, the ranch hands gathered to watch. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered encouragement. The girl knelt beside the newborn, steadying it as it wobbled. Its legs buckled several times, nearly toppling it, but she held firm, whispering every word of reassurance she could muster. The mare pawed the ground nervously, sensing the strain. Everyone felt the tension, the raw, fragile energy of life balancing on uncertainty. That evening, the girl sat on a bale of hay, exhausted but focused. She looked at the foal as it rested beside its mother, legs tucked awkwardly under its body. She knew the battle was far from over. She had learned patience, courage, and the complexity of hope. But she also understood that progress came in tiny increments, and that every day held new challenges. Yet, despite everything, a spark remained. The foal had tried. It had struggled. And it had survived another day. The ranch seemed quieter than usual. The wind whispered across the fields, and the sky shifted from gray to the faint glow of dusk. The girl stayed near the stall, stroking the mare gently and speaking soft words to the foal. She felt the weight of the world pressing down, yet also felt a strange clarity. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if the foal would ever walk properly, or if it would survive the coming weeks. But she knew this. She had found a spark in the newborn that no one else had seen. A spark that was stubborn, fragile, and undeniably alive. And as the barn doors rattled in the evening breeze, the girl made a silent promise. She would not give up. She would not walk away. Whatever lay ahead, storms, setbacks, doubt, and challenge, she would be there. because some battles were worth fighting simply to see life persist, even when the world whispered that it was impossible. And in that quiet barn, with a mare, a foal, and a determined girl, hope had taken its first trembling step. The days passed slowly, each one feeling longer than the last. The girl spent hours in the barn, her hands raw from constant care, her clothes streaked with straw and dirt, yet she never stopped. She noticed every twitch, every tremble of the foal's legs, every subtle movement that suggested it might be learning how to balance. Some mornings it seemed weaker than ever, its eyes barely opening, its tiny chest rising and falling too quickly. Other times she caught flashes of strength, a stubborn determination that made her heart pound in a strange mix of hope and fear. Every step forward was followed by hesitation. Every small success carried the weight of the unknown. The ranch hands grew restless. Some muttered about wasting time, saying the foal should be left alone. They didn't understand the quiet bond forming between the girl, the mare, and the newborn. A few watched with cautious curiosity, leaning on the fence, whispering to each other, unsure if what she was doing was brave or foolish. The older worker continued to observe silently, offering occasional advice, his eyes shadowed with experience. He said little, but every glance toward the girl and the foal seemed to carry a mix of concern and quiet admiration. One afternoon, a sudden commotion outside the barn caught her attention. A group of ranch hands had gathered near the fence, shouting and gesturing. She hurried outside, worried that something had gone wrong. As she approached, she saw a young colt from another part of the ranch had gotten loose and was charging toward the barn. The mare pawed the ground, sensing danger. The foal's legs twitched nervously, almost knocking it off balance. The girl's heart jumped. She had to act fast. She sprinted forward, her voice rising over the chaos, calling the foal and mare back. The older worker followed, trying to help, but she reached the foal first. The newborn tried to scramble, its backward legs failing to obey. She held it gently but firmly, whispering encouragement, using every ounce of strength she had to keep it from panicking. The mare neighed sharply, charging the colt off just long enough for the girl to regain control. Her muscles burned from the effort, but she didn't let go. The foal finally settled, its eyes wide but alive, and she breathed a shaky sigh of relief. That evening, as the barn settled into quiet again, the girl noticed the foal trying something new. Tentatively, it pushed itself up, legs trembling, almost buckling, but standing for a fraction of a second. Her heart surged with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She rushed forward to steady it, whispering softly, her hands shaking. The mare stood close, watching, alert and protective. The ranch hands had gathered near the doorway, their whispers heavy with disbelief. Even the older worker's eyes widened slightly. This was the first real moment that suggested progress, yet the girl knew it was only the beginning. The foal's legs were far from strong. One wrong move could undo everything. Night fell, and the barn took on a tense stillness. The girl remained beside the foal, brushing the mare's coat while keeping a steady hand near the newborn. Every creak of the barn, every sound of hooves outside, made her flinch. She sensed danger lurking in shadows, the possibility of setbacks hanging over her like clouds. Sleep was impossible. She could only watch, ready to react, ready to protect. She whispered to the foal, telling it wasn't alone, promising it that she would not leave. She felt the tiny tremors of fear in its muscles, the uncertainty in its movements, and knew that each night was as critical as the day. In the following days, the girl began experimenting with new ways to strengthen the foal. She used soft straw ramps, gentle lifts, and careful guidance to encourage muscle development. Each attempt was fraught with tension. The foal would sometimes collapse, its legs bending awkwardly, eyes wide with panic. She would scoop it up, cradle it against her chest, whispering reassurances, and let it rest. The ranch hands muttered warnings about pushing it too far. The vet returned several times, his face tight with concern, reminding her that the deformity was severe, and the foal's fragile body could only take so much. Yet she refused to give in to despair. One morning, a new challenge appeared. A heavy storm rolled in over the ranch, rain slamming against the barn roof, wind rattling the doors, and lightning flashing across the sky. The mare grew tense, pacing the stall, while the foal shivered violently. The girl had to hold it close, soothing it with gentle touches and soft words. The storm dragged on for hours, relentless, testing her patience, her endurance, and the foal's fragile strength. She whispered every moment, never letting it feel alone. Even the vet arrived, observing from the doorway, noting her resolve with a mixture of worry and admiration. Tensions among the ranch hands began to rise. Some openly doubted her, saying the foal's suffering was needless. Others, quieter, began to see a shift, a flicker of life that no one expected. The older worker stayed near, offering hints and guidance without interference, a silent support. The girl noticed him watching her differently now, as if he recognized that what she was attempting was rare and difficult. The barn became a battlefield of patience, hope, and fear. Every movement, every twitch of the foal's legs was critical, every sigh and whisper could make the difference. One afternoon, the foal made a small, staggering attempt to stand. Its legs trembled violently, collapsing under its weight. The girl's hands shot forward, steadying it, heart racing. The mare nickered anxiously, pressing close to her baby. The ranch hands watched in stunned silence, some holding their breath, others whispering that it wouldn't last. The girl felt sweat on her brow, muscles burning from constant vigilance, yet she refused to let the moment slip. The foal's eyes met hers, and she saw a glimmer, a spark of determination, a defiance that made her believe they were on the edge of something remarkable. The next days were filled with intense focus. The girl experimented with feeding schedules, gentle massages, and carefully monitored attempts at movement. She discovered small things that helped, a particular straw arrangement, a specific way of supporting the legs, even subtle changes in the way she spoke. Each discovery brought hope, but also a deeper tension. One misstep could break the fragile progress they had made. The foal's body was still frail and its legs remained weak. The storm outside the barn mirrored the storm in the girl's mind, full of uncertainty and the weight of responsibility. Then came a moment that changed everything. The foal attempted to rise again, trembling violently, legs buckling under the pressure. The girl braced herself, holding tightly, whispering encouragement, guiding each movement with care. For a few long seconds, the foal's hooves touched the straw, and it remained upright. Its balance wavered, legs shaking uncontrollably, but it stayed on its feet. The mare nickered, pressing closer to the girl and foal, sensing the significance of the moment. The ranch hands, gathered near the barn door, exchanged looks of disbelief and awe. Even the older worker's lips pressed together tightly as he watched, eyes wide. That night the girl couldn't sleep. The memory of the foal, standing even briefly, played in her mind on a loop. She sat near the stall, stroking the mare's neck, whispering to the foal, her hands trembling from exhaustion. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The legs were still weak, the deformity severe, and the foal's body fragile. She knew there would be moments of collapse, moments of doubt, moments when the entire effort could seem pointless. But the spark she had seen gave her a fierce determination. It had survived this far, it had tried. And that was something no one could take away. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the straw and whistling through the barn rafters. Shadows moved across the walls, making the barn feel alive with possibility and danger alike. The girl felt it in her chest, a tightening she couldn't explain. Something was coming, a challenge they had yet to face, something that would test all the progress, all the hope, all the determination she had poured into the foal. She didn't know what form it would take, only that it was approaching and that when it arrived, nothing would be the same. She leaned close to the foal, whispering for it to be strong, promising it she would not leave. Its small eyes blinked up at her, trust and recognition forming a fragile connection. The mare pressed close, protective and alert. The barn held its breath. Outside, the wind swirled, carrying the scent of rain and tension. Every muscle in the girl's body tensed, ready for what she knew was coming. The foal had survived the impossible so far, but the hardest test had not yet arrived. And as the shadows shifted across the barn floor, and the storm outside rumbled low, the girl felt the moment approaching when everything she had done would be put to the ultimate test, a moment when the foal's fragile life, its trembling legs, and her own courage would collide with the challenge that had been waiting all along. The storm raged through the night, rattling the barn doors and driving rain against the roof. but inside, the girl held her ground. She stayed close to the foal, her hands steady, even though her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. Every crack of thunder made the Mari tense, pressing her body closer to the foal, and every flash of lightning illuminated the trembling newborn. The girl whispered softly, letting the sound of her voice cut through the chaos. She reminded the foal that it was not alone, that together they had faced more than anyone expected. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment without knowing exactly what it would bring. Now she realized that preparation was only part of the battle. Courage, patience, and belief were what truly mattered. As the wind howled and the rain poured, the foal made another attempt to rise. Its legs shook violently, folding at awkward angles, but the girl held it carefully, guiding it with gentle strength. She felt the tension in its small body and matched it with her own steadiness. Inch by inch, the foal lifted, teetering on legs that had seemed impossible moments before. The Murray nuzzled it, encouraging, protective, and the barn seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the storm tore at the fields, but inside, a quiet force of persistence and trust held the fragile trio together. For the first time, the foal stood for more than a few seconds without collapsing. Its hooves pressed into the straw, legs trembling but bearing weight, and a low nicker escaped its tiny throat. The girl's heart soared. She whispered encouragement, tears spilling down her cheeks as she knelt beside the foal, her hands brushing over its coat. The Moray stepped closer, pressing against the foal's side, giving it balance and comfort. It was a moment of triumph, fragile yet monumental. The impossible had taken its first real steps toward reality. Word of the foal's progress began to spread across the ranch. The skeptical ranch hands, who had whispered doubts and shaken their heads, watched with growing awe. Even those who had insisted the foal was doomed were forced to acknowledge the determination and bond that had brought this far. The older worker, who had observed quietly for days, finally approached the girl. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said simply, "You were right to believe. That little one has more heart than most ever see." His words carried a quiet respect, a recognition of the courage it took to keep hope alive when everyone else had given up. The following days were filled with careful care and steady progress. The girl devised small routines to build strength and balance, allowing the foal to practice standing and shifting weight gradually. The vet returned, impressed by the girl's patience and skill. He offered advice, suggesting exercises and dietary improvements to support the foal's muscles and joints. Even the ranch owner joined in occasionally, helping reinforce the girl's efforts and acknowledging that the tiny horse had a chance at life. The barn, once heavy with doubt, now buzzed quietly with hope. One crisp morning, sunlight filtering through the barn windows, the foal managed to take its first wobbly steps forward. The girl stayed close, hands hovering to support if needed, her voice soft and steady. The Murray followed, nuzzling and encouraging, and for a moment time seemed suspended. Each step the foal took was unsteady, trembling, and filled with risk, but it walked. The girl felt a thrill of triumph that she could hardly contain. She whispered, laughing softly through tears, "You did it." "You really did it." The Mara's ears flicked forward, eyes gleaming with pride, and the ranch hands standing nearby exchanged looks of disbelief and admiration. The journey was far from over. There were still moments of struggle, days when the foal's legs failed, and nights filled with tension and worry. But the bond between the girl, the Mare, and the foal had grown unbreakable. The barn became a sanctuary of patience, love, and perseverance. The girl learned to read every movement, every flick of an ear, every twitch of muscle, finding guidance in the foal's subtle reactions. Her faith in the horse deepened, and in turn, the foal's trust in her grew stronger. As weeks passed, the foal's movements became steadier. It learned to shift its weight without collapsing, to balance on legs that once seemed hopeless. The girl developed a gentle routine, allowing it to explore the barn and small paddocks under careful supervision. Each success was celebrated quietly, not with fanfare, but with the gentle satisfaction of knowing what had once seemed impossible was now within reach. The Mireille remained a constant source of encouragement, her presence reinforcing the lessons of trust, patience, and resilience. One afternoon, the older ranch hand approached the girl with a small smile. "You've done something remarkable here," he said. "Most people would have given up long ago. But you saw what no one else could. The girl smiled back, a mix of pride and exhaustion in her expression. She didn't need validation, but hearing it aloud brought a quiet sense of closure to the doubt that had lingered in her mind. She knew the journey had changed her as much as it had changed the foal. A month after the foal's birth, it was strong enough to trot short distances with the girl walking alongside. The once backward legs, while still unusual, had strengthened enough to carry weight and support movement. The barn had transformed from a place of fear and uncertainty into a space filled with cautious celebration. The ranch hands now spoke of the foal with a mixture of respect and amazement, marveling at its determination and the girl's unwavering care. Even the vet admitted that he had rarely seen such progress in a case that had seemed hopeless. The girl spent her days teaching the foal to trust itself, reinforcing what it had learned through countless hours of support. She developed a routine of short walks, gentle exercises, and quiet conversations with both the foal and the mare. Every day was a lesson in patience, every night a test of resolve. The barn was no longer just a place for chores, it had become a classroom of perseverance, filled with lessons that extended beyond the animals to anyone who witnessed the process. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the girl stood at the edge of the corral, watching the foal attempt a small gallop. Its legs, once impossible, now carried it forward, clumsy at first, but growing more confident with each stride. The mare followed closely, neighing encouragement. The girl's heart swelled with pride. The journey had been long, filled with doubts, fears, and moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. But here, in the golden light of dusk, the impossible had been transformed into reality. The ranch owner approached, clapping softly. "I didn't believe it was possible," he admitted, voice tinged with awe. "But you proved us all wrong," the girl shook her head, smiling. "It wasn't just me," she said. "It was the mare, the foal. We all did it together." The older ranch hand nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "There's a lesson here," he said quietly, "about patience, belief, and never underestimating what can happen when someone refuses to give up." The foal, now able to trot steadily and attempt short runs, nuzzled the girl's shoulder, and she laughed softly. She realized that the journey had been about more than teaching the foal to stand or walk. It had been about learning to trust, to care, and to persist when every obstacle seemed insurmountable. The barn, once filled with doubt, now held a quiet celebration of life, resilience, and determination. In the days that followed, the girl continued to train the foal, strengthening its legs and building confidence. She never lost sight of the challenges ahead, knowing that each step forward carried risk. Yet, every time the foal pushed itself further, she felt the satisfaction of shared triumph. The journey had been long, exhausting, and at times frightening, but the reward, a small horse with backward legs, standing, walking, and even trotting, was beyond measure. By the time the foal could run across the paddock with steady confidence, the barn had transformed. The ranch hands, once skeptical, now watched in admiration. The mare, calm and proud, stood beside her foal, her trust in the girl unbroken. The older worker approached one final time, his eyes reflecting the weeks of hard work and hope. "You did more than save a horse," he said quietly. "You taught all of us what it means to believe." The girl smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She looked at the foal, now moving with grace it never could have achieved on the first day. She felt a swell of pride, not only for the horse but for herself. She had faced doubt, fear, and exhaustion, yet she had never let go of hope. And now, standing in the golden light of the barn, surrounded by the people and animals she loved, she understood that belief, patience, and care could make the impossible possible. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the paddocks, the girl whispered to the foal, "We did it. You're stronger than anyone thought, and so are we." The mare nuzzled her gently, and the foal nickered in agreement. Outside the barn, the ranch settled into quiet, carrying the lesson that no matter how impossible a challenge may seem, courage, patience, and unwavering belief could overcome even the most daunting odds. The girl lingered for a moment, looking out across the fields, feeling the wind against her face, and understanding that this journey had changed everything. She had learned that hope was not passive, it was active, persistent, and sometimes the only thing that could turn a hopeless situation into a new beginning. The foal, once thought lost, now stood as a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of belief, and a reminder that even the smallest heart could achieve the extraordinary when met with care, love, and unwavering determination.